Hi there and welcome to section 4, styling our application. So in this section we're going to look at CSS modules and limiting the scope of your styles, and Flexbox for easier layouts. CSS modules. In this video we're going to look at how we can use CSS modules to protect ourselves from having global CSS all throughout our projects. CSS modules help limit the scope of your styles. So what do I mean by that? So typically when you define a style in CSS or Sass, which is then compiled to CSS, you give it a name, for example, and then you can use it anywhere in your app. You just import it once and it's globally available, which is kind of what we're trying to move away from with JavaScript. And obviously that means, things like if you give a style the same name in two different parts of your app, it might clash. There's like any number, people use the styles all over the place and you don't really get a sense of where they're actually being used, which makes them quite hard to maintain. And so CSS modules is a way of limiting the scope of where these styles can get to and how you use them. So I'm going to show you with some examples what it is and how it works. So what we've got here is a basic Webpack setup. It's very similar to the Webpack setup we looked at earlier. And I've got a little bit of code which says create a p tag, put some text in it, set a class really big and add it to the page. I've got a CSS class here, dot really big, which sets the font size to 60. So if we take a look at that in the browser, when you reload the page, you might notice it's not there immediately. It gets added in as the JavaScript does it. Let's have a quick inspect. So you can see the class is really big. Here is some text. If we look at the styles for the project, it's Webpack's inline them in here, but you can see we've got dot really big and the font size 60. It's a little bit kind of not aligned properly, but you can hopefully make that out. So how do we make it so that you can't just use this anywhere? So right now, if in some other part, in some other file, I created a P with a class really big, it would also be really big. And I couldn't have a separate class called really big, which I used in two places. And maybe that sounds like contrived, like, oh, why would you want to do that? But what I found is, not having global stuff everywhere was a very good idea in JavaScript. Like, I don't know what, that's how it started out and it was a real downside. And I think the same thing's true of CSS really. And so this technique really, if like me, perhaps you're not the best at CSS, I've been working in this domain for a good few years, but before that I was a programmer, doing more kind of back-end stuff. So to me, CSS is still a relatively new thing. And it is powerful, but it's also kind of dangerous and you can do things that are a bit stupid. And what CSS modules does is protect you from yourself. And that's why I really like them personally, because you can write a terrible style, but you can limit, where that style actually gets to. Okay, so how do we make this a sort of, a CSS module kind of style? And what does that even mean? So if you go into the Webpack config for your project, I think you can do this in most of the different options we've got, but I'll show you in Webpack because it's the easiest for me to turn on. So if you find the CSS loader here, and you can see that there's this query bit with some options, and what we've got here is this weird string, which basically is saying how you want to name your CSS styles. That's not currently being used, but you'll see it will be after this. And we've got modules false, so I'll switch that to true, and we'll restart Webpack. That's just loading back up. Okay, and you can see immediately we've lost the style. What's going on in here? So you can see this has changed. So now it says .styles. The name of the class has changed. .styles _ really big. So you can see it's still the same thing with a font size 60. And then there's this random 6 characters at the end. Now this is the name that was defined in Webpack. Let's check that out again. So path, so that was like styles. Local, that's the local name, which was really big. And then -- and then some sort of hash of length 6. That's what's caused that to happen. Because the name's changed, when I've used really big here, right, it needs to be this name. But obviously, especially because there's this random bit at the end, how do you get hold of this now that the CSS module stuff, it's kind of scrambled the name basically. That's what it does. It scrambles the name so that no one could reasonably ever guess it, which then means that there's only one way of using it, and I'll show you how you're supposed to use it. So back inside index.js, we've imported the styles here. So now what we do is we say import style from, So we get this style as a variable. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to console.log that. We can take a look at what that means. This is quite a weird thing, right? You're like importing non-JavaScript file, but then you get back this sort of JavaScript variable. This is something that Webpack does. Let's just see how it works. I think it's the clearest way to explain it. So you can see here it's an object, and the key is really big, and the value is the exact name that we just wanted of the style with the random bit at the end. So what that means is we can use that in here, style.reallyBig. Not sure if you can do that, so I'm just going to do it like this. So actually when you use CSS modules, I'd probably name them differently like that, in a more JavaScript friendly way, but the same logic applies. So let's switch back. And now you can see it's working again because we've dynamically used that variable, and now we get the correct class name in here and it just works. The cool thing about this is that you can't use the styles in this file because the names have all been randomized basically, so you can't guess what they are. You can't use them unless you have an import statement like this and then you grab them out of this style object. So that means the style sheet will still be just as big, I suppose. It will still have all the same number of styles, but you're less likely to have clashes and you're less likely to have, you can define styles and just use them in one place, safe in the knowledge that, they're not being used anywhere else. So you get a lot of isolation, which is really, really good. So that, in a nutshell, that's what CSS modules are. Now here I've used not jQuery, but the built-in document, APIs to DOM nodes and stuff to manipulate things. Obviously this would work with jQuery, it would work with Angular, and it would work with React, which is where I normally use it. Yeah, and if you are looking to stick with Sass or CSS, then yeah, this is a really good option for solving one of the big problems it has, which is that everything's global all of the time. Instead, you can create a style. What I'll normally do is if I'm building a component in, say, React, I'll keep the styles with that component and only import them there, and you end up with lots of little files with styles in, but you kind of know, if you make a real mess of a style, you kind of know that the damage is probably limited. Whereas if you make a real mess using the sort of cascading features and stuff and blah, 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 then it's a different kettle of fish. But at the same time, you can keep all the great features. So you can still use media queries and you can do other things. Now, CSS modules has caused problems for me in some use cases, specifically with CSS styles that use like keyframe animations. I'm not that familiar with this feature, but I've seen it break. And also, if you import third-party libraries, so for example, I'm trying to think of a good example, but if you import another, like say some React component or whatever, some component that you grab for whatever it is you're using, and it comes with some styles, that library will probably expect that the Webpack is not going to mangle the style names. So what you can do to get around that is in Sass, you might say something like, I don't know, I think it's something like @import, and then you say what you want to import, and you would kind of say, it's a really weird syntax that's kind of difficult to learn, but this means node modules, and then you might say like, my library that you just grabbed off the web. And then in there they might have like, I don't know, style.css. And then what will happen now is Webpack will go, oh, well, I need to like load this in. So we'll go and find this, and it will use this loader, and this loader will then make this, a module, which is not great because probably this wasn't designed to be used in that way. So what you can do, this import in a global statement, you can Google all of this when the time comes. It's just something to bear in mind. So you can do that, and then it will import it without the modules. I've seen this sometimes not work, but maybe they'll fix it soon. Hopefully the Webpack guys or whoever's in charge of this functionality fixes it. The other thing you can do, if that doesn't work, which on occasion it hasn't worked, is you can add another loader. So you'll see in here we've got this CSS loader and it says exclude node modules. You can add a loader that doesn't have modules turned on for that particular folder in node modules or that particular library. You can have like a separate loader that perhaps is a little different to the one that you use for the SCSS that you're writing. And I think in a nutshell, that is CSS modules.